Peace, guys. What's good, everybody? You now tune into the Unruly Philosopher. Today, we're going to talk about programming in the realm of the program versus the programmer. And this aspect of my philosophy, I'm just giving a breakdown of how I view things and how I'm still learning and extending on what I've learned from history and kind of what I see as view us as a race, but also like just mankind itself, and what I mean by programs. Everything we experience to this point is somewhat of different types of programming. Education system is a program. Religion is a program. You following a health regimen is a program. So it's not necessarily bad, but what I'm trying to shine light to and talk to the light inside of you is to open up your eyes to make sure you're not following somebody else's program. For example, I touched on this on a little of the other podcasts, and if you catch my radio show on iHeartRadio, I talked about like let's, for example, us as a people collectively. Um, when we look at the education system, it's a program. You got certain standards and procedures you have to follow in order to receive something. But what do we get out of that? What is it producing? Is it cultivating new thoughts, new development, new cultures for our people, or is the program benefiting somebody else? So when we dive into just looking at like history in itself, what program have we been following even the last thousands of years? You know, if you want to look at the sub-Saharan uh, slave trade, you got to deal with the Arabs and their form of programming, and when they come in and evade Africa with Islam, and because that was not birthed from us, that is another man's programming and knowledge that we took on years later. But then that gave birth to the transatlantic slave trade. And that's whether you want to believe it happened or it did happen. Um, Regardless, that mindset and that programming is still here because we're following Christianity heavily in the Western uh, hemisphere. And so what we have to look at in all these different programs, they give birth to education. And when you look at like the, so-called white man, or this is say the westernized frame of thinking, their program produces workers out of us. But how they get us to the programming is we get like trinkets. So, I'll get on here on any day and tell you that technology would be the European man's religion. They don't necessarily really believe in a God. It's technology. And what I mean by that, everything that we experience through technology, through education system framework comes from the original man's mind. It's just been flipped upside down. So when we think about programming, we have to think about how that affects us collectively. How does it affect kids? So think about school. Everything we experience in this program right now is reinforced through like white ideology, and I'm using white, black, because I know the general sense of people know exactly what I'm talking about. This ain't necessarily a white and black thing, but like this is just the reality right now. What we're having experienced, they're constructs, but I'm gonna be breaking that down on a later podcast about the different social statuses, constructs, and things like that. But for right now, y'all know what I mean. So if you sensitive for words, get over it. Words only have power over you if you allow it. So, so I got to use these so I can make sure that the poor people the rich people, the middle class people that's in our society, they all can relate to certain terms and know what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm talking to. Really, I'm talking to the light inside of you, because I know most people are going to argue with their emotions. They're not actually being themselves. And so I rather talk to that light that's inside of them, because even if they don't see it, I know what I'm saying will reach them sooner or later. And so when we think about these programs, and for instance, we first in school, we learned the alphabet. We learned the English language. We eventually start learning about the presidents. But what is wrong with that programming? You never see anybody that looks like you in the center of it. So think about when you're a kid and you're starting to learn about, the George Washington, being the president. But they don't tell you that George Washington owned slaves either. They don't tell you he had teeth from slaves. So when they don't tell you that, what do you think that program does to you? You start seeing people of that fair complexion in a status higher than you, and it's reinforced through teachers, principals, government officials, political, in a political field, your police officers, predominantly in America, on your news, on your media, you see all these things that's reinforcing that program. And so what I'm saying is that if you don't start to rewrite your own program, you're going to be participating in somebody else's, and it's going to be to your detriment. And what we're experiencing collectively as people is an amalgamation of generations and generations following somebody else's program. And a lot of that came after the burnings of our Black Wall Streets everywhere. I'm from Oklahoma, but even I don't like the fact that we just highlight like Tulsa. You know what I mean? But this was a planned and organized crime committed on our people to reinforce their programming back on us, because we were rewriting our own program. That's why we were practicing our own autonomy. We didn't need anybody else, because we had our own philosophy, we had our own culture, we had our own teachings, and that's what made us strong. They broke us through reinforcing that by with weaponry. Technology is what we would call it. To the point to where we were beaten down, to where our ancestors at that point had to figure out a different avenue to keep us moving forward as a race. The problem is that we're still in it because of the civil rights movements, and all these other things got us completely bought into their programming. And here we are today, slowly trying to climb back out of it. So, when I look at history and really, really look back on history all around the world, because our ancestors were everywhere, you can't necessarily just tie us to a landmass. And we as people should be fighting about that, because when you claim a landmass, it allows other races of people to claim one. But the problem with that is other races of people haven't quite explained where they come from. If you look through our ancestors' history, they're always explaining things. You can go back thousands and thousands of years before there was ever a mythological Abraham or Moses to ever exist. We have documents, of what our ancestors was doing all around the world. So I challenge you to focus on that, to start to reprogram your mind, but not even that. Don't get stuck on that. We're supposed to be taking what our ancestors already experienced and becoming something completely whole new and greater than that. And so, for instance, it's like, for example, if you look at the Nile Valley civilization, you can see there was a phase of like pyramid building over thousands and thousands of years. But you can see the first pyramid, they were trying to build. They just abandoned it. Then they tried another one, abandon it. And they get closer and closer to perfecting it. Then, you get to a step pyramid that was built by Imhotep, to the pyramid of Saqqara. It's a step pyramid. They're getting closer and closer to that full peak of a pyramid, an apex pyramid. Excuse me. And this took thousands and thousands of years. And so, even if you look at calendar systems, the calendar of Dendera, and all these systems, you got 25,000 years of programming from a culture that was being updated over time, just like those pyramids were. And that's what that culture produced, was perfection in a sense. Because when I look at pyramids, I see a phase of humans trying to figure this out and finally reaching to a point where they perfected something. But we ask ourselves, what happened to that? What happened to those people? But you see this all around the world, even in the Americas. You see, you don't see pyramids quite like you do over in Africa or in Asia, but you see different forms of it, because what we have to understand is you have to use what is around in your environment. So the one thing I know that connects us as people is our spiritual systems, but what we have to understand is ecology. So no matter where I'm at in this world, I can be in Africa or I can be in America, but I can look at the spiritual system and see a comparison that they made this use a different animal, but it still represents the same aspect. But when we get into that, we're talking about anthropomorphism, where you would take an animal head on a human body, but there was a science behind that, teachings. And I'm gonna really dive into that on a podcast with animation, so I can show you and give you a breakdown of the full aspect of what these things meant, and how when you looked at different deities and things, they were just aspects of nature that reside inside of you. They were functions. And so when I look at that programming and I see what it has done for us over time, I see what it produced. Some of the most documented civilizations in the world were done by our people. And what we left behind was things that we can still see. So my question is, why would somebody go in to rewrite that programming? And so when we really look into these type of things, what I've come to realize is like the butterfly effect in my version of it. Let's say it's like, for me looking at this, it's like we've been here for so long that at one point our ancestors realized that they were running out of time all around the world. It's almost like their consciousness was slowly getting to a point closer to where we are now, to where they wasn't retaining the information. So they started documenting it on walls and temples everywhere. And it was about us reconnecting with it. But at the end of the day, if someone else has it, it's ours, and we can always connect back to it because we'll realize it's ours, over time. And that's kind of how we are today, is waking up as people in all different phases, and what we're starting to realize is that we've been following somebody else's program, and there's a reason why they go out of their way to erase the walls, to paint them a whole different color, or it's the reason why, they won't tell you that the pyramids just in Kemet outdate every biblical character. They're not going to tell you that, because they need you to believe in a biblical story, because that reinforces other cultures and gives them reason why they even in Africa. I'm talking about the Arabs. We're talking about Israel. We're dealing with the Jews there. And many other cultures. You can even go into deeper into, South Africa, all these other places. So when we accept these things, we're allowing, and we claim landmasses, we're allowing other people to inherit things that don't belong to them. And so yes, it's important to challenge that. But what we don't need to do is get into a form of programming where I'm saying I'm something and I'm not this. And so I get on the internet to argue with people every day. That's a form of programming because you're not trying to do the work. It's like once you know who you are, there's nothing to prove to nobody, you know? Once you learn who you are and your culture, start to learn that culture. What I should be seeing is for everybody that's saying they African, for everybody that's saying they indigenous, Indian, whatever. Once you say that, start teaching people about the culture. Start connecting people with it, teaching them the language, the foods, the spiritualism. That's more important than talking about every day about how great we are and nothing comes from that. That's another form of programming to where it's like it's like you're stuck in a cycle again and you got to break it, you know? And so it's important to self-evaluate. Always make sure that your thoughts are your thoughts. And what I mean by that is read books for information and not truth. Don't believe nothing I say. Don't believe nothing nobody says in a book. Just read it for information. Don't let, because you dislike somebody, you don't want to hear nothing they got to say because they may have a political view. They may have a religious view. You may have just missed out on some information you could have updated to your computer that's in your mind, you know? And so no matter if I dislike even people that did horrendous things to us through our history, I like to read about where their philosophy was coming from and what was their angle, because I know this is a battle of the minds. So it's important to always stay sharp, always know enough about who you are trying to identify as your enemy, you know, and things like that. But like I said, even in one religion, read religious books in the eyes of the writer and not the viewer, and you'll have a better aspect of maybe why they were writing these things. Um, because a lot of these things were not meant for us to still be doing this day. Um, and it's unfortunate because Abrahamic religions have destroyed, it's a single-handedly has destroyed us as people, because we're trying to attach ourselves to another man's philosophy. And it doesn't produce what we think it's trying to produce for us. Because it took the God aspect that we had programmed to know as ourselves, and it took that aspect and put it into something. And so people get triggered even when I say things like that, because if I'm going to talk about God, I'm always going to circle it back to myself. Because even you, when you say that you believe in a God, you still had to use your mind to even conceptualize that thought. I'm just saying I recognize that thought comes from the same essence that's inside of me. And I am that manifested in the physical. I don't separate myself from it. So I get it though. And I'm not here to necessarily bash people. I'm not even here to argue with people, even if it's in comments after I make posts and stuff like that, because I understand there's levels to this. And I just say what I have to say and move on, because I follow my own philosophy. I'm not trying to get people to follow mine. I'm just putting information out there, and I think that's important. And we all should be. Um, that's how you update your system. But just some of y'all still running on the first iPhone. And we way up here in the 14s, about to be the 15s now. And that's like religion in the world we live in now. Some of y'all still going to church, believing in the same beliefs that your grandparents did, but it really don't serve you like it served them. You know, um, they use that as a tool to help them in their situations. You're just still going because of the programming they had you just going every Sunday, but you don't really believe in that stuff. The programming is you're just afraid of hell. If you remove that aspect of religion, most of y'all go back to doing y'all whatever every day. You wouldn't even be thinking about consequences and things like that, or afraid of going to a place where you're going to burn for eternity, not even realize that you're made of fire, you know? Um, so, when I think about like these certain types of programs, I always try to, like I said, reinforce my thought process. And I always try to um, strike down when I hear things that I know I don't want in my mind. So if I'm talking to somebody and they're trying to put their philosophy, their beliefs in my mind, I will respectfully shoot it down, because I'm always about reinforcing to my subconscious mind that I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? And so I think that's important, because it's easy to fall under somebody else's philosophy. We see it all the time. And so, like I said, when you listen to people, don't listen for truth. Only listen for information. You go validate it, then let it become true to you then, you know, and that will help you a long way in life. So you're not out here getting conned by people and nothing like that, you know. And like I said, I'm still on my journey. I'm just on here and probably will say the things that you don't want to say, but I'll say it for you. I'm not afraid to express my mind, and put it out there, because I know it's going to help people. I know it's going to make people mad, but I'm not afraid of nothing when it comes to speaking out, especially when it comes to religions or the system or whatever we want to think it is, because, we like to think that the programming is, the old white man running the system, when we don't even realize the system is operates off of contracts. And so when we have to try to understand the mind of the Europeans' culture, is they already put in a system where it can run itself contractually. And so that's why they gave you certain statuses and things like that. Um, not realizing that everything is ran like a business. And so, but there's nothing stopping you from rewriting your own program and following your own philosophy, creating your own nation, creating your own tribes, doing all that different stuff. Nobody's stopping you from doing it but your mind, because you're still in their program, and you manifest it by every time we have conversations. There's always somebody saying, well, what if they come destroy it? What if they do that? It's like, that tells me the level of your thought process. And so you shouldn't worry about what they're going to do. You should be working towards and doing what you need to do. And you'll deal with the other aspects as they come. But if you're studying history and understand how our ancestors did certain things, you should be learning from that and taking that and astounding on it. We should be taking all the information that our ancestors did, studying it, and become something completely new and even greater. That's what's supposed to be happening. But if we're continually following somebody else's program, it's going to constantly keep us in a cycle of being workers for them. We'll never get as high as we think we're going to get in their system. Excuse me. Like, they'll give us people to look at, to think that we all can chase that. But at the end of the day, we're chasing a ghost in this system. And until we start practicing self-autonomy, we'll forever, stay in this rat race that's going to lead to a slow, conscious death for us, to where we'll end up with nothing, and I don't want to see that. So I'm not afraid to tell us, even humanity, that a revolution is needed. And I'm talking about a revolution of your mind to question everything. Ask what you would think the tough questions would be about everything that you experience. Don't let fear stop you, because that's a part of the programming in the system, to stop you with just your thought process, and you'll never lay a brick down to build a new neighborhood. You'll never open a book about anything to start teaching your family about financial literacy, about community type stuff. So, what I want to leave y'all with today is, at the end of the day, you always want to control your environment. You always want to study your environment. You always want to be one with your environment and live by those laws. No man is above the universal laws, and especially laws that we're experiencing today. Don't let them put boundaries on you. And so I'm gonna leave y'all with that. And like I said, um, stay strong, stay vigilant, and stay dangerous. Peace, guys.